In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the new 2024 D&D Player's Handbook backgrounds that are due to release at the time of recording in a couple of weeks' time. This video is perfect for anybody who wants to check out the new background rules, or indeed anybody that is looking to create a new character following the D&D 2024 Player's Handbook. So let's get into it, shall we? At this point, if you are creating a character, you will have chosen your character class, most likely, and then moving on to creating your character origin, which is a species, which is the term replacing race from the previous editions of Dungeons & Dragons, if you're familiar. So you'll be choosing your species and also your background, and we will be covering that in today's video. As part of your background, you also get what is called an origin feat. So we will also be covering that as part of this as we go through the backgrounds, which will become a little bit clearer as we go. The intent for this video is to go through all of the backgrounds as they appear in the Player's Handbook in alphabetical order. So there's no kind of ranking system here. The intent is to show you what each background gives you and also what the related origin feat is as well. So, let us begin, shall we? If it will play ball with me here. Wait a second. This has gone terribly wrong. Oh, because I'm starting at the end of my slideshow and not at the beginning. Great start. Okay. First up, we have the Acolyte background. Now, narratively, the idea behind this background is that you've devoted yourself to service in a temple, either nestled in a town or a secluded sacred grove, performed rites in honor of a god or maybe even a pantheon of gods. You will have served under perhaps a priest, studied religion, and thanks to the instruction and devotion that you have either received or carried out, you have learned how to channel a little bit of divine power in service to your place of worship and the people who prayed there. If you are familiar with previous editions of Dungeons & Dragons, how this used to work is that you would take your species, or race as it would have been referred to then, and that would have given you boosts to your ability scores. That's no longer the case. Instead, it is your background that is going to give you those ability score boosts. And when you choose your background, you get to choose how you want to spread out the ability score boost. Each background, you have the option of either adding a +2 to one of the ability scores given, and then also a +1 to another, or if you prefer, you can actually add a +1 to all three. The Acolyte, the options that you have are to boost your intelligence score, your wisdom score, or your charisma score. So pretty much any spellcasting-based class is going to get benefits from taking the Acolyte background in those ability scores. I'm not necessarily a min-maxer myself, but it's all good to flag these things up. You also get the Magic Initiate Cleric feat, which we will come to in just a moment. You also gain skill proficiencies, which is going to allow you to add your proficiency bonus to any of these skill rolls whenever you roll them. So you get to choose either insight or religion. I believe you should also have some skills proficiencies as part of your class choice as well. You also gain proficiency, in the calligrapher's supplies, which is one of the tools that have been explored and expanded out in this latest rules update, which I'll be covering in more detail in another video soon. So then when you also choose some additional equipment as part of being an Acolyte, you get the choice of either choosing Calligrapher's Supplies, which you've just gained proficiency in, a Book of Prayers, a Holy Symbol, and 10 sheets of parchment, as well as a robe and 8 gold pieces. Or, if you prefer, you can take 50 gold pieces and buy your own equipment with that, if you'd rather do that. That's the Acolyte background, but there's one glaring thing that we've not really covered in detail, which is the Magic Initiate Cleric feat, which is one of the origin feats. Now, every single background comes with a feat. that is tied to it, in this case, the Magic Initiate Cleric origin feat. And by the way, all of these texts that you're seeing on your screen are as they appear in the Player's Handbook. So it's pretty accurate word for word in what you're reading. The Magic Initiate feat comes in, basically you get to choose a spell list to tap into, Cleric, Druid, or Wizard. The backgrounds themselves explicitly state which one you should be choosing in the case of taking the background. So in this case, it's Cleric, but the Magic Initiate feat works exactly the same for all variants of it. In this case, obviously, you're choosing 2 cantrips of your choice from the Cleric spell list, and Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma is your spellcasting ability for the feat's spells. You get to choose that when you select the feat. So you could, if you wanted to, take the Cleric Magic Initiate list, as is the case here, which normally would be based on Wisdom modifier if you were a Cleric. But you might be, for example, a Bard who uses Charisma for your spellcasting. So it would be helpful then for you to instead choose Charisma, for example. So that would allow you to do this, casting Cleric spells using your optimal spellcasting ability. You also get to choose a level 1 spell from that same list that you selected. You also have that spell, or rather you always have that spell prepared. And you can cast it once without using a spell slot, and regain the ability to cast it in that way when you finish a long rest. You can also cast the spell using any spell slots that you have. Now, this is really important here, and I think when a lot of the playtest stuff was coming through with this, it wasn't exactly clear why this was such a common feature, specifically in relation to always having it prepared and being able to cast it without using a spell slot. As it turns out, the rules of the game have been tweaked slightly when it comes to spellcasting. Before, it was a rather convoluted ruling as to how many spells you could cast, or rather what spells you could cast in a single round of combat. The kind of simplified, though not necessarily accurate version of it, but tends to cover most cases, is how it was previously, is that if you cast a leveled spell, you would not then be able to cast any more leveled spells. You could only cast a cantrip. Again, that is a very reductive version of it and not entirely accurate, so don't at me. But that's the shorthand that a lot of people use to cover most bases, as I say. What's changed is that the rules actually now are that you can only use a single spell slot in any given round of combat, which covers, again, most bases in a similar way. However, the kind of loophole that you get to use, which I think is very much intended, is that if you cast one of these spells that you've chosen as part of your Magic Initiate feat, and you cast it without using a spell slot, that means you're free to cast another slotted spell that turn. Now, obviously, you're going to be limited in terms of whether that's an action, or a bonus action, or a reaction, etc. But in terms of being able to utilize more spells in a given turn, that's quite the unlock. The other thing to bear in mind as well is that whenever you gain a new level as part of this Magic Initiate feat, you can replace one of the spells you've chosen for this feat with a different spell of the same level from the chosen spell list. So that would be either a cantrip or a level 1 spell in that case, because you basically only get the choice of cantrip or level 1 spell. That's how I understand it anyway. But the other thing is that you can also, it explicitly states that you can take this feat more than once, which is a specific feature of many feats. Usually feats aren't repeatable, but in this case it is. You can take it more than once. However, there is a caveat that if you do take it any additional times, you must choose from a different spell list. For example, if you've just taken the Magic Initiate Cleric origin feat, then you would have to choose either Druid or Wizard next time you took it. Okay, so that is the Acolyte and Magic Initiate Cleric feat. Next up, we have the Artisan. Now, this, narratively speaking, is the blurb that it gives is: you began mopping floors and scrubbing counters in an artisan's workshop for a few coppers per day as soon as you were strong enough to carry a bucket. When you're old enough to apprentice, you learn to create basic crafts of your own, as well as how to sweet-talk the occasional demanding customer. Your trade has also given you a keen eye for detail. The ability scores that you gain as part of this Artisan feat, you get to choose again, adding either a +2 and a +1 to 2 of them, or a +1 across all 3. You get to choose strength or dexterity and intelligence. So it's not a bad one for the martial classes, but also fairly good for the likes of wizards and things like that. You gain the crafter feat, which we'll come to in a moment. You also gain proficiency in investigation and persuasion. Again, this kind of keeping a keen eye out for things and that keen eye for detail, that they've justified that with the investigation, and also your ability to sweet talk demanding customers with the persuasion skill proficiency. You also get to choose a kind of artisan's tools. Again, I'm going to cover tools in more detail in another video. And when you choose your equipment, you can either take the artisan's tools that you've just gained proficiency in, or maybe a different one if you prefer, 2 pouches, some traveler's clothes, and 32 gold. Or if you prefer, you can just take 50 gold pieces and buy your own equipment. As part of the Artisan, you gain the Crafter Origin feat. You also gain a tools proficiency with 3 different Artisan's tools of your choice from the fast crafting table. Again, we'll cover tools proficiencies in another video. Tools from that fast crafting table. But if you note that by having the Crafter feat and the Artisan, you're actually going to gain a total of 4 Artisan's tools proficiencies, which becomes very useful. You also gain a discount whenever you buy a non-magical item. You automatically receive 20% discount on it. I'm not entirely sure why. From a narrative perspective, I guess maybe you could roleplay it as you know your stuff. You're like a hobbyist, if you will. It's that persuasive element of being an artisan, perhaps. You've got a lot of free room to negotiate how that might play out from a narrative perspective. On the crafting rules, which I've covered, not in detail, but I've already covered in an Earthed video that I did. I will go into more detail in another video soon. With the crafting rules, some people have asked whether or not when you're crafting, because the value of the item dictates how long it takes to craft, whether the crafting cost is, whether that discount is applied. That's not the case, because it explicitly states that whenever you buy a non-magical item, you get 20% discount, so you wouldn't be taking that new discounted price into account when you were crafting. However, you do have the fast crafting feature as part of this feat. So whenever you finish a long rest here, you can craft 1 piece of gear from the fast crafting table, provided that you have the artisan's tools that's associated with that particular item, and have proficiency with those tools as well. And this is, because it's fast crafting, this is like a shoddy job it will manage. It basically falls apart when you finish another long rest, so you only get it for what is essentially a day, and then it just falls apart because you've just done it quickly. That can be quite helpful when it comes to needing non-magical items fairly quickly. A great sort of additional thing for you to be able to do when you wake up in the morning, as well as choosing things like your spells or your weapon masteries and things like that. You can say, okay, what kind of tool do I think, or what item do I think I'm going to need as part of this next adventuring day, and I'll just quickly throw that together. Very nice. Okay, next up we have the Charlatan background. From a narrative perspective, once you were old enough to order an ale, you soon had a favourite stool in every tavern within 10 miles of where you were born. As you travelled the circuit from public house to watering hole, you learned to prey on unfortunates who were in the market for a comforting lie or two, perhaps a sham potion or forged ancestry records. So this is the confidence trickster, essentially. The ability scores that you get to give yourself a boost on, again, choosing either 2 or 3, depending on your choice, is dexterity, constitution, and charisma. So this is good for rogues, obviously, because of dexterity, or even bards and sorcerers would make a good choice here as well. You gain the skilled feat, which we'll cover in a moment, and skills proficiencies in deception and sleight of hand, which are all fairly obvious. You are a kind of confidence trickster, charlatan character. You also gain proficiency in the forgery kit, which is your tool proficiency in this case, and you get to choose either to take a forgery kit, which you've just gained proficiency in, a costume, fine clothes, and 15 gold pieces, or if you prefer, you can take 50 gold pieces and choose your own. In terms of the skilled feat here, a very simple origin feat. You gain proficiency in any combination of 3 skills or tools of your choice. And you can take that feat more than once as well. Really nice and simple. I suppose from a narrative perspective, you get to narrow down on exactly what sort of skill set this charlatan takes advantage of to take advantage of people, for want of a better phrase. All right, next up then, we have the criminal. Slightly different from the charlatan. Narratively, you eked out a living in dark alleyways, cutting purses or burgling shops. Perhaps you were part of a small gang or of like-minded wrongdoers who looked out for each other. Or maybe you were a lone wolf, fending for yourself against the local thieves' guild and more fearsome lawbreakers. So this is a much more general criminal, a burglar, a thief, or something like that. Your ability scores here are Dexterity, Constitution, and Intelligence, which is slightly different from the Charlatan, which was Dexterity, Constitution, Charisma. This is Intelligence. So this is a slightly smarter, but maybe less suave ne'er-do-well. They also gain the Alert feat, which is a very good feat, which we'll cover in a moment. You gain Sleight of Hand and Stealth. So again, this is not about deception in this case. That's more the Charlatan's bag. This is more about being able to slip in somewhere quietly, do whatever you need to do, and then get out of there quick. You gain proficiency in Thieves' Tools, so again, great for burgling places and breaking into places, utilizing those Thieves' Tools. You get to choose either 2 daggers, Thieves' Tools, a crowbar, 2 pouches, and traveler's clothes, and 16 gold pieces, or if you prefer, you can choose 50 gold pieces and choose your own. The Alert feat, this is a good one. It's a very simple one, but a good one. You have initiative proficiency. Whenever you roll initiative, you actually add your proficiency bonus to that roll, which is going to start out at a +2. So you're automatically going to have a +2 on your initiative, which is superb. Can make a real difference. Again, the idea is to get in there quick, do whatever you need to do, and then get the hell out of there. Great for if you're considering a rogue, and especially great if you're considering an assassin rogue. Because obviously if you can get in there first and do a lot of damage, then that's very much an optimal choice there. But the other interesting one here is the initiative swap. So immediately after you have rolled your initiative, you actually are able to swap your initiative with the initiative of one willing ally in the same combat. You can't make the swap if you or the ally has the incapacitated condition. So if, for example, you're in a position where you roll first, and maybe you're not an assassin, so you don't get the benefits of necessarily going first, but your fighter guy here, who's got 2 or 3 attacks in the first round, you've rolled really high, and you're like, actually, you can probably do more damage than I can, why don't you go in first? Make that happen. Which is a pretty cool little thing. But equally, it can work the other way around too, right? If you roll badly, but you are an assassin, you could say to perhaps your, I don't know, that's not really a class that can't do much damage, but another character that wouldn't be able to do as much damage as you as an assassin, you say, hey, do you mind if I go first? And if the player's willing, then just swap it around. Very nice feat. Going first in initiative can be a big game changer in terms of the flow of combat. A simple one, but a goodie. Okay, now we have the Entertainer background. Obviously great for bards, but other classes too, because actually the feat is pretty good. So, in terms of the ability scores that you get, it's Strength, Dexterity, and Charisma. Oh, I didn't do the narrative. You spent much of your youth following roving fairs and carnivals, performing odd jobs for musicians and acrobats in exchange for lessons. You may have learned how to walk a tightrope, how to play a lute in a distinct style, or how to recite poetry with impeccable diction. To this day, you thrive on applause and long for the stage. So yes, so you gain Strength, Dexterity, or Charisma, so again, +2 to one and +1 to another, or a +1 to all 3. You gain the Musician feat, which we'll cover again in a moment. you gain proficiency in acrobatics and performance. So again, the idea being a musician / acrobat in there as well. Obviously, this is great for bards, but also could be potentially good for monks, or even any martial class, actually, for that matter, with the strength and dex thing. Could be very good. And if you want like a hint of bard in another class, because any of the martial classes with the strength and dexterity would be covered with this very well. Sorcerers even. I think that probably most classes on some level are going to be covered pretty well by the entertainer backgrounds. So if you wanted to add a hint of bard in there, then the entertainer is a great way of doing that. You get to choose one kind of magical instrument as your tool proficiency, and you can choose either the same musical instrument that you chose above, 2 costumes, a mirror, perfume, traveler's clothes, and 11 gold pieces. Or if you prefer, you can take 50 gold pieces and choose your own. The musician feat, one of the best, I would say, feats here. You gain proficiency in 3 musical instruments of your choice. Much like the crafter feat, when you combine it with the entertainer background, you actually get to choose a total of 4 musical instruments of your choice. But, and this is the cool bit, when you finish a short or long rest, so an hour-long rest or an 8-hour-long rest, you can play a song on a musical instrument with which you have proficiency, and give heroic inspiration to allies who hear your song. The number of allies you can affect in this way equals your proficiency bonus, which normally will start off at +2 at level 1. Heroic inspiration, if you're not familiar, you might be familiar with 5th edition already, or maybe you're new to the 2024 version of the game, or indeed new to Dungeons & Dragons entirely. But in the previous version of 5th edition, you had inspiration, which allowed you to gain advantage on a d20 roll. A heroic inspiration takes that a step further and replaces inspiration in this version of the game. So heroic inspiration is not advantage on a roll, but is actually a re-roll of any dice roll that you'd like. Advantage previously applied only to d20 tests, which are ability checks, saving throws, or attack rolls. Whereas heroic inspiration applies to any dice roll. So if you're taking a short rest, for example, and you roll one of your hit dice and you're like, got a 1, you could just, I'm going to use my heroic inspiration and re-roll that. And I believe, although I might be wrong on this, I believe you get to choose? No, I think I might be wrong on that. The Player's Handbook hasn't officially come out yet, so I'm still piecing things together. But certainly, at the very least, it is a re-roll of any dice roll. So you get to give that to a minimum of 2 of your allies. Now, interestingly, it is specifically your allies, so you can't give it to yourself, but you can give it to one of the other party members. So starting at a minimum of 2 of your party members, you can grant heroic inspiration to, which is very useful. Okie dokie. Next up then, we have the farmer background. This is from a narrative perspective, for the character who grew up close to the land. Years tending animals and cultivating the earth rewarded you with patience and good health. You have a keen appreciation for nature's bounty, alongside a healthy respect for nature's wrath. Ability scores that you can improve here are strength, constitution, and wisdom. So this is great for any kind of martial classes that rely on strength. So less rogues and less monks, I would imagine. Probably more fighters, barbarians, and possibly paladins here. But constitution as well, which is pretty much across the board. Paladin's actually very good because you get the strength and wisdom side of things, and they flip between both ability scores being quite important. So paladin's a great choice for a farmer. You gain the tough. You also gain proficiency in animal handling and nature, as well as the tools proficiency of carpenter's tools. And as part of your equipment, you get to choose either a sickle, carpenter's tools, healer's kit, iron pot, shovel, traveler's clothes, and 30 gold pieces. Or if you prefer, you can take your 50 gold pieces and choose your own. In terms of the origin feat, you get the tough origin feat, which is again another simple one, but a classically good one. Your hit point maximum increases by amount equal to twice your character level when you gain this feat, which will usually be at level 1 in this case. Whenever you gain a character level thereafter, your hit point maximum increases by an additional 2 hit points. If you were to up your Constitution modifier by 2 as part of the farmer background here, you can actually make your hit point maximum increases each level to a minimum of +3 if you were to do that. So that can be very handy. If you have a really high Constitution score and manage to bump it up even higher, you could make a significant increase in your hit points every level. So a very useful feat, particularly if you anticipate that you are going to be a character that's going to get in the fray quite frequently. So this is, again, great for your barbarians, your fighters, and your paladins, and to some extent your monks as well. Next up, we have the guard background. Your feet ache when you remember the countless hours you spent at your post in the tower. You were trained to keep one eye looking outside the wall, watching for marauders sweeping from the nearby forest, and your other eye looking inside the wall, searching for cut purses and troublemakers. This is very much the city guard background. Your ability scores are strength, intelligence, and wisdom. So strength, obviously, from a narrative perspective for your training, and intelligence and wisdom for perception of the world, particularly as it relates to wisdom and spotting things. You gain the alert feat, which we've already covered, but I'll touch base on briefly again in a moment, which obviously makes sense for the guard, as well as skills proficiency in athletics and perception. And again, both make sense, covering both the physical training and also your ability to keep an eye out for everything that's going on around you, constant awareness. So perception makes a lot of sense there. And you get to choose one kind of gaming set for your tools proficiency, which I suppose narratively is for those times where you're in the barracks, passing time during your downtime. And you get to choose either a spear, light crossbow, 20 bolts for the bow, the same gaming set as above, a hooded lantern, and manacles, a quiver, traveller's clothes, and 12 gold pieces. Or if you prefer, you can take 50 gold pieces and choose your own equipment. Just touching base on the alert feat, this was the one that allows you to add proficiency bonus to your initiative rolls, and also the same one that allows you to swap your initiative with somebody else after you have a very good all-round background, particularly for those physical classes. Particularly good, I would say, for a fighter in this case. Then we have the guide. You came of age outdoors, far from settled lands. Your home was anywhere you chose to spread your bedroll. There are wonders in the wilderness, strange monsters, pristine forests and streams, overgrown ruins of great halls once trod by giants, and you learned to fend for yourself as you explored them. From time to time, you guided friendly nature priests who instructed you in the fundamentals of channeling the magic of the wild. Ability scores here: dexterity, constitution, and wisdom. So great for your dex-based classes such as rogue if you wanted to, but also very good for things like druids and clerics, those divine spellcasters as well. You get the magic initiate feat, this time druid. Again, we'll recap that feat in a second. You gain skills proficiency in stealth and survival, stealth being good for keeping out of the way of those strange monsters that it mentions, and also survival, great for exploring as well. So exploring whilst keeping out of trouble, which of course is very much, again, narratively befitting of the guide. You also gain tools proficiency in the cartographer's tools, which again fits in narratively very well for somebody able to create maps of the local areas that you've explored and guided people around, so that makes a lot of sense. In terms of your equipment, you get to choose either short bow, 20 arrows, cartographer's tools, bedroll, quiver, tent, traveller's clothes, and 3 gold pieces. Or if you prefer, you can take your 50 gold pieces and choose your own equipment. Just as a reminder of the Magic Initiate feat, this is the same one that allowed you to choose 2 cantrips of your choice from one of the spell lists listed, which is Cleric, Druid, or Wizard. In this case, it's dictating Druid to you, and you get to choose Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma. You're likely probably going to want to choose Wisdom here because you've chosen the guide background and you might get a bump to Wisdom, but it's your choice entirely. You also get to choose a level 1 spell from that Druid spell list in this case, always having it prepared and being able to cast it once a day without using a spell slot. You can also get to change that spell whenever you gain a new level, replacing one of the spells that you chose with this feat with a different spell of the same level from the chosen spell list. And again, this is a feat that you can take multiple times, but you have to choose a different spell list each and every time you do. So that's a reminder on the Magic Initiate feat. Next we have the Hermit. I love this background. Makes me feel a bit of Obi-Wan Kenobi coming through. So you spent your early years secluded in a hut or monastery located well beyond the outskirts of the nearest settlement. In those days, your only companions were the creatures of the forest and those who would occasionally visit to bring news of the outside world and supply. This solitude allowed you to spend many hours pondering the mysteries of creation. In terms of your ability scores here, you get to bump Constitution, Charisma, or Wisdom here. So very good for the Wisdom and Charisma-based classes. So again, great for Druids, great for Clerics, great for Sorcerers, great for Bards. You gain the Healer feat, which is, I think, a pretty good feat, which we'll cover in a moment. You gain skills proficiency in Medicine and Religion. So this is very much the sort of person that is great at healing people that find themselves out in the wilderness seeking solitude or something like that. And also pondering the mysteries of creation, as they mentioned in the narrative bit. You also gain tools proficiency in the Herbalism kit, which is great because that means you'll be able to craft potions of healing, for example. So again, this is very good for a character who wants a little bit of a touch of that healing aspect without necessarily having chosen a cleric or druid or ranger, actually, I think. Is ranger wisdom? I feel like ranger's wisdom. Might be dex and wisdom, perhaps. My mind has gone blank on that. But yes, ranger could be a great one for being able to apply some healing, non-magical healing specifically, in this case, aside from obviously potions of healing. But they're a weird middle ground between magical and non-magical, one could argue. So in terms of the equipment that you choose, you can either take the option of a quarterstaff, herbalism kit, bedroll, a philosophy book, a lamp, 3 flasks of oil, traveller's clothes, and 16 gold pieces. Or, if you prefer, you can take 50 gold pieces and choose your own equipment. Now for the Healer feat, which is a great origin feat, I think. First of all, you get the Battle Medic property, where if you have a Healer's kit, you can expend 1 use of it and tend to a creature within 5 feet of yourself as a utilize action. That creature can expend 1 of its hit point dice and then roll that die. The creature regains a number of hit points equal to the roll, plus your proficiency bonus, which will obviously start out at +2 and increase as you move up in levels. There's a lot to break down here on the Healer's kit, a lot of new and interesting things, but I really love this feature. So the Healer's kit traditionally, and I believe this still applies in the 2024 rules update, but the Healer's kit as of the 2014 Player's Handbook only allowed you to actually stabilize a creature that was at 0 hit points and was dying. Allowed you to stop them from dying, at least temporarily, provided they don't take any more damage, but to stabilize them so that they're just merely unconscious rather than dying. It didn't actually allow you to heal anybody with hit points. So this then turns the Healer's kit actually into what it's actually called, which is a kit for healing somebody as opposed to stabilizing them. Utilizing the utilize action, which is a new type of action that is explicitly stated in the Player's Handbook. Basically, those actions where you're using an item or interacting perhaps with an aspect of the environment, such as pulling on a lever, and using your action to utilize that, which is great for kind of the vernacular of the exploration pillar of the game and being able to say, oh, I'm going to use my utilize action to pull on that lever. And then they get to expend 1 of their hit dice, adding your proficiency bonus. Although that being said, most parties are at the same level, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. But then, in addition, you gain healing rerolls as a feature. So whenever you roll a die to determine the number of hit points you restore with a spell, or with the Battle Medic benefit, you can re-roll the die if it rolls a 1, but you must use the new roll, which means essentially when you're using Battle Medic, you are guaranteed, almost guaranteed, because you could roll a 1 again, but you are almost guaranteed a +2 in hit points when you use the Battle Medic, or indeed any healing rolls at all to determine hit points. Now, specifically, though, it is whenever you roll a die to determine the number of hit points you restore with a spell or with the feat's Battle Medic benefit. So it is from your spells or utilizing the Battle Medic benefit. Equally, this doesn't count for things like potions of healing and things like that. But still, a very good feat. The Merchant background, a good general background, I find. Constitution, Intelligence, and Charisma are your ability score choices. You are apprenticed to a trader, caravan master, or shopkeeper, learning the fundamentals of commerce. You travelled broadly, and you earned a living by buying and selling the raw materials artisans need to practice their craft, or finished works from such crafters. You might have transported goods from one place to another by ship, wagon, or caravan, or bought them from travelling traders and sold them in your own shop. Again, ability score increases here, Constitution, Intelligence, and Charisma. And as a reminder, you can pick 2 to add a +2 and a +1 to, respectively, or you can add a +1 across all 3. You gain the Lucky Feat, which has changed somewhat, which we'll cover in a moment. You also gain the skill proficiencies in Animal Handling and Persuasion. The Animal Handling one, I presume, is to be representative of the amount that you will have travelled, because presumably there's cart and horse or cart and ox and something that you've had to utilise to travel with. And obviously Persuasion is that kind of salesmanship, if you will. There's Navigator's Tools as your tool proficiency, which again I think makes sense given the amount of travelling that you've likely will have done. And you get to choose either to take Navigator's Tools 2 pouches, Traveller's Clothes, and 22 gold, or if you prefer, you can take 50 gold pieces and select your own. So the Lucky Feat here. Now this one has changed a little bit. It's a subtle change, but it's a change. So you gain luck points as you did before, equal to your proficiency bonus. You can spend the luck points on the benefits below, and you get to regain any of those expended luck points when you finish a long rest. Now, this is where things have changed quite significantly. So the benefits that you gain are to either apply advantage to a roll or disadvantage to somebody else's roll, an attack roll specifically. So advantage on any d20 test, again that's an ability score, a saving throw, or an attack roll, giving yourself advantage. You can't apply it to an ally, but you can give yourself advantage to a d20 test, or disadvantage to a creature that rolls a d20 for an attack roll specifically against you specifically. You get to spend 1 luck point to impose disadvantage on that roll. So where this is significantly different, and it's not explicitly stated here, of course, but Lucky previously allowed you to re-roll a bad roll, basically. So you knew the result, and then you'd be like, I'm going to spend a luck point to try and make that better. That's not the case anymore, because you're applying advantage to the roll, which means explicitly that you have to spend the luck point before you roll. A lot of people are fairly lax. In fact, I had it come up today that technically speaking, using inspiration in previous rules, you should be giving yourself advantage, means you should be happening before the roll happens, not after, because that would be classified as a re-roll. Because this is advantage, this should be happening before you roll the dice and not after. So that is a very particular and very subtle shift, that you are giving yourself advantage or giving somebody else disadvantage before they have rolled the dice. Lucky has been nerfed a little bit, just to flag that up for any of you coming over from the 2014 Player's Handbook. Next we have the Noble background. You were raised in a castle, surrounded by wealth, power, and privilege. Your family of minor aristocrats ensured that you received a first-class education, some of which you appreciated and some of which you resented. Your time in the castle, especially the many hours you spent observing your family at court, also taught you a great deal about leadership. The ability scores in question here that you get to increase are strength, intelligence, and charisma. Strength for your martial classes is great. Intelligence and charisma, much more representative of being at court, certainly. For the wizards and the bards and the sorcerers, a great choice. I often used to play a sorcerer noble combination, so that fits in very well for me in terms of the sorts of characters that I used to like to build. You gain the skilled feat, which we've covered already, but we'll recap in a second. And you gain proficiencies in history and persuasion. Again, that makes a lot of sense because persuasion, you're rubbing shoulders with politicians and aristocrats and the like. So you will have gained that persuasive kind of schmoozing quality. And also, you generally, again, and it's mentioned in the narrative there, will have been taught the histories and things as part of your upbringing. So that makes a lot of sense. You gain proficiency in one kind of gaming set, which, okay, I can see why that might come in. It's an odd choice, but I suppose it's probably the best there is for a noble in terms of a tool proficiency here. I guess you probably will have played cards or something of that at some point. In terms of the equipment, you get to choose the gaming set, the same one that you chose, fine clothes, perfume, and 29 gold pieces, or, if you prefer, you can take 50 gold pieces and select your own equipment. As a recap on the skilled origin feat, this is the one that gives you proficiency in any combination of 3 skills or tools of your choice, and you can take that feat more than once. So again, this is a good choice because you will have had that first-class education that was mentioned previously, so that makes a lot of sense in terms of making you proficient at more things. Now we come to the Sage. You spent your formative years travelling between manors and monasteries, performing various odd jobs and services in exchange for access to their libraries. You whiled away many a long evening studying books and scrolls, learning the lore of the multiverse, even the rudiments of magic, and your mind yearns for more. In terms of your ability scores here, it's Constitution, Intelligence, and Wisdom. Great for clerics, great for wizards, great for druids, and those sorts of things. But you also get the Magic Initiate Wizard. Maybe not great for wizards because you already have access to a lot of these things, but this is great for a character that wants to dip into a little bit of wizardry without necessarily going full wizard. But again, generally, a pretty decent one for most classes on some level, particularly because of that Constitution score. But again, great for the clerics and druids and things like that want to tap into the arcane just a little bit. So you would gain proficiency in Arcana and History, again, fitting in very much with that time studying. You gain tools proficiency in Calligrapher's Supplies, which I believe allows you to craft spell scrolls as part of the new crafting rules that were introduced as part of the 2024 Player's Handbook, which is very cool. You get to choose in terms of your equipment, quarterstaff, calligrapher's supplies, a history book, 8 sheets of parchment, a robe, and 8 gold pieces. Or if you prefer, you can take 50 gold pieces and choose your own equipment. So as a reminder on the Magic Initiate feat, again, we've covered it twice already, but you get to learn 2 cantrips from the wizard's spell list in this case, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma being your spellcasting ability, your choice which one you want to use. Likewise, a level 1 spell from the same list that you've chosen, which you can cast once a day without spending a spell slot, and you always have it prepared, and you can change any of those spells, or rather one of those spells, when you level up for another one, or a different one, on the same spell list that you chose for this feat, and you can take the feat more than once, but again, you must choose a different spell list each time you do. So then we have also the sailor background. So you lived as a seafarer, wind at your back and decks swaying beneath your feet. You've perched on bar stools in more ports of call than you can remember, faced mighty storms, and swapped stories with folk who live beneath the waves. Ability scores of choice here: strength, dexterity, and wisdom. Great for the likes of druids and clerics. both of which I believe have domains, or rather subclasses, that could be linked to the sea. I know the druid certainly does. And of course, strength and dexterity being another option. So great also for your more martial classes, rogues and fighters, etc. You gain the Tavern Brawler feat, which we'll cover in a moment. You gain proficiency in acrobatics and perception, which again makes sense. If you're a sailor, you're constantly looking out at sea for a sign of any danger, and climbing the rigging and all sorts of other things for the acrobatics, so that makes sense. And you gain tools proficiency in the navigator's tools, which when you choose your equipment, you can take those, a dagger, rope, traveller's clothes, and 20 gold pieces. Or as always, if you prefer, you can take 50 gold pieces and choose your own equipment. In terms of the Tavern Brawler feat, so there's a few things to break down here. So you get the Enhanced Unarmed Strike. So when you hit with your unarmed strike and deal damage, you can deal bludgeoning damage equal to 1d4 plus your strength modifier, instead of the normal damage of an unarmed strike. Unarmed strike is an interesting one. This is why I needed to break it down a little bit. Unarmed strike now encapsulates your grapples, your shoves, and also just an unarmed strike as you would know it from previous editions. So when you make an unarmed strike, you choose whether you want to damage, grapple, or shove. The normal damage of an unarmed strike that is referred to here is 1 plus your strength modifier. This allows you to change that to a 1d4 plus your strength modifier, potentially increasing it by 4 points, or rather 3 points. Also, whenever you roll damage die for your unarmed strike, you can re-roll the die if it rolls on 1, and you must use the new, so you have a further opportunity to increase the damage of that unarmed strike. You also have proficiency with improvised weapons. Normally, if you're attacking with the leg of a bar stool, for example, you wouldn't add your proficiency bonus because you've just picked up this random thing. You've not necessarily trained on how to beat people up with a bar stool, unless you're a tavern brawler, in which case you have, and you're very good at just hitting people with just random objects. So you gain proficiency and you get to add that. So that's going to make you more likely to hit on your strikes, which is great. Equally, when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike as part of the attack action on your turn, you actually get to deal damage to the target and push it 5 feet away from you. As I said earlier, normally when you make an unarmed strike, you're choosing between grappling, pushing, or dealing damage. This allows you to double up on damage and pushing. So basically you're choosing push and damage or grapple. But you can only use that benefit once per turn. So if you have something like a flurry of blows that offers you the ability to make multiple unarmed strikes in a go, you can only do that once. And likewise, if you have an extra attack and you choose to unarmed strike with one of them, you only get to push once in that instance. But still, a very cool unlock. We're coming close to the end now. Just whilst I take a drink of water. If you have found this video helpful, by the way, do hit that like button and hit that subscribe button as well, and the bell icon, so you get notified of any future videos that I put up. That really helps to feed the algorithm gods and spread the word of this channel and our various shows that we have here, including our actual play Bardic Quest, if you did want to see some D&D in action. Next we have the Scribe background. You've spent your formative years in a scriptorium, a monastery dedicated to the preservation of knowledge, or a government agency, where you learn to write with a clear hand and produce finely written texts. Perhaps you scribed government documents or copied tomes of literature. You might have some skill as a writer of poetry, narrative, or scholarly research. Above all, you have a careful attention to detail, helping you avoid introducing mistakes to the documents that you copy and create. So, this, in terms of ability scores, is dexterity, intelligence, and wisdom. The dexterity thing makes a lot of sense in terms of accuracy and making sure that you are writing nicely. And intelligence and wisdom, obviously, the amount of time that you've spent in these locations of knowledge or indeed governmental agencies, as they mention. You gain the skilled feat, which we'll recap in a second. In fact, actually, let's jump straight in because it's nice and simple. An additional 3 skills or tools of your choice. You gain skills proficiency in investigation and perception on top of that as part of choosing the scribe background. You gain Tools proficiency in the calligrapher's supplies, which again makes a lot of sense and will allow you to craft, I believe, spell scrolls. I hope I've got that right. I seem to remember that was right when I did a video on the crafting rules recently. So yes, calligrapher's supplies, fine clothes, a lamp, 3 flasks of oil, 12 sheets of parchment, and 23 gold pieces. Or as always, if you prefer, you can choose 50 gold pieces and choose your own equipment. So that is the Scribe background. Cool background, nothing too exciting there, but great if you want to be a skills monkey and make spell scrolls. Then we have the Soldier feat, which is slightly different from the Guard feat. This one is less about how you perceive things and more about just hitting things hard. You began training for war as soon as you reached adulthood, and carry a precious few memories of life before you took up arms. Battle is in your blood. Sometimes you catch yourself reflexively performing the basic fighting exercises you learned first. Eventually, you put that training to use on the battlefield, protecting the realm by waging. Unsurprisingly, in terms of your ability scores here, you get Strength, Dexterity, and Constitution, which are all the 3 physical abilities of the game. So this is not about improving the way that you perceive the world, your knowledge, or indeed how persuasive you are. This is pure physicality. You gain the Savage Attacker feat, which we'll cover in a moment, and your skills proficiencies are in Athletics and Intimidation. You also choose a gaming set of your choice to be proficient in, much like the Guard, again, representative of that downtime in the barracks. And you get to choose either a spear, shortbow, 20 arrows, the same gaming set that you chose for your proficiency, healer's kit, quiver, traveler's clothes, and 40 gold pieces. Or as always, if you prefer, you can choose 50 gold pieces and select your own equipment. The Savage Attacker feat here. You've trained to deal particularly damaging strikes. Once per turn, when you hit a target with a weapon, you can roll the weapon's damage dice twice and use either roll against the target. All this does really is increase the likelihood of an increased damage output. So this is about, again, as I mentioned, this whole background is not about anything above and beyond hitting things as hard as you can, and possibly, maybe with the Intimidation skills proficiency, scaring some foes off as well in the process. And finally, then, the last background, we have the Wayfarer. You grew up on the streets surrounded by similarly ill-fated cast-offs, a few of them friends and a few of them rivals. You slept where you could and did odd jobs for food. At times, when the hunger became unbearable, you resorted to theft. Still, you never lost your pride and never abandoned hope. Fate is not yet finished with you. So this is Street Urchin. In fact, I imagine this probably replaces the Urchin background that existed in the 2014 Player's Handbook, but this covers that kind of archetype, if you will, the down and outer, perhaps. Your ability score increases here are Dexterity, Wisdom, and Charisma. It's a lot about perception of the world and even how you are perceived, and also that dexterous ability, that kind of thief quality that is mentioned in the narrative there, is represented by the Dexterity ability scores increases. And again, as a reminder for the final time, when you choose your ability scores to increase, you can either choose 2 from this list to add +2 to one of them and a +1 to the other, or you can choose to add a +1 to all 3. So you gain the Lucky feat, which again we'll recap in a second, but we've already touched on it. You gain skill proficiency in Insight, so good at reading people, and Stealth, good at not being seen when you need to. And Tools proficiency in Thieves' Tools, again representing that occasional need to resort to theft to survive. Your equipment choices are either to take 2 daggers, Thieves' Tools, a gaming set, a bedroll, 2 pouches, traveler's clothes, and 16 gold pieces. Or if you prefer, take 50 gold pieces and choose your own equipment. In terms of the Lucky feat, just to recap again, you gain luck points equal to your proficiency bonus, which you regain any expended luck points when you finish a long rest, and you can use those to apply advantage to any D20 test to yourself, or disadvantage to a attack roll against you from an enemy. And again, explicitly, if you are coming over from previous editions of the game, this feat does not equate to a reroll anymore. This is to be applied to the roll beforehand, because it is advantage, not a reroll. That brings us to the end of the backgrounds and origin feats from the 2024 Player's Handbook. I hope you found that useful. Again, this is intended as a video for those that are curious about the new backgrounds and origin feats coming in the 2024 Player's Handbook, or if you are building a character with the 2024 Player's Handbook and want some guidance on those background feats. This is a great video, I hope, for you to check out and to have listened to. Again, if you did find this video helpful, please do us a massive solid and hit that like button and the subscribe button as well, and hitting the bell icon so that you get any notifications for any further videos that we put out, and also help us to feed the algorithm gods and appease them so that more people learn about what we're doing here on this channel. But my friends, thank you so much for tuning into this video as we covered backgrounds and origin feats from the 2024 Player's Handbook. And I'll be putting out more videos, so again, make sure you hit that subscribe button, covering a lot more detail of the Player's Handbook and the character creation options that will be available to you there. Thanks very much for tuning in, and may the dice be ever in your favour.